All right, let's look at bacteria, part 2. We are on the reading guide on page 3L, part F. Tell how the following differ: heterotrophs, photoheterotrophs, photoautotrophs, chemoautotrophs. Three big ones: the heterotrophs, photoautotrophs, chemoautotrophs. I don't think you'll see an awful lot about the photoheterotrophs. Let's look at the heterotroph. Just like animals who cannot make their own food, they have to get their source of food from another organism, another source. Some bacteria are heterotrophic, other feeders. They take the organic molecules from the environment or other organisms to use as energy and carbon supply. So they must get their food from another source of energy. They live in a wide range of environments. You can find them just about anywhere. Okay, so let's go back to the chart. Photoheterotrophs, they can use light to make their ATP, but they have to use other sources to obtain their carbon. They are unlike photoautotrophs. Photoautotrophs can make their own food using light to convert carbon dioxide into their carbon compound. So photoautotroph, and there are not too many of these bacteria, they can use light to make ATP, but they still have to eat other organisms or other matter to get their carbon supply. And they live where light is plentiful. Now, the photoautotroph, these are bacteria that can make their own food. Photo, meaning they need light to make their own food. They use light energy to convert carbon dioxide into carbon compounds. They live where light is plentiful. Remember when we talked about photosynthesis, carbon fixation, light is used in the light energy, the light cycle of photosynthesis to convert that carbon dioxide into useful compounds in the Calvin cycle. So this is what photoautotrophs do. Self-autotroph means self-feeder, auto, self, troph, feeding. So they use light to make their own food. Chemoautotrophs can make their own foods, but they use chemicals to do so. They are a chemical self-feeder. These type of bacteria live deep in the ocean, in thick mud. They live in digestive tracts of animals such as us. They live in boiling hot springs. They also are plentiful in the ocean vents, deep in the ocean, where a lot of chemicals, sulfur compounds coming out of the earth, and you can find these chemoautotrophs, and they form the base of the food chain at these ocean vents. They use energy released by chemical reactions involving ammonia, hydrogen, sulfide, and chemicals like that. So these are the four ways in which prokaryotes capture energy. At how prokaryotes capture energy, let's look at how prokaryotes release their energy. So energy release, this is the chart on page 583 in the Bird Book. Obligate aerobes. Now, anytime you see the word aerobe, you're going to think living with oxygen. Well, obligate means they are required to have oxygen. So if an obligate aerobe is in an environment where there is no oxygen, they will die. So they're going to live in oxygen-rich environments near water surface or in animal lungs. They have to have oxygen to live. They release their energy through the process of cellular respiration. They have to have a ready supply of oxygen to release fuel energy. So like us, they are required to have oxygen. Most of our cells are obligate aerobic, requiring oxygen. We are not prokaryotes, but our cells, like the obligate aerobe, require oxygen, most of our cells. Okay, the obligate anaerobe, they require a lack of oxygen. These organisms are killed in the presence of oxygen. When I see the word obligate, you're obligated to. Well, an obligate anaerobe, obligated to die in the presence of oxygen. An obligate aerobe, obligated to live in the presence of oxygen, or you could say obligated to die without oxygen. Okay, obligate anaerobe. They must live in an oxygen-free environment. Deep soil, animal intestines, airtight containers. So when you see a dented can like this, in your cabinet or in the grocery store, if you're in the grocery store, go take it to the front desk to the manager, because that means that there are obligate anaerobic bacteria that are living inside the can, and they produce some horrible toxins, and these toxins will kill you. Clostridium botulism, sometimes found in improperly sterilized canned food, causes food poisoning, and it will kill you. They release their energy in fermentation. They die in the presence of oxygen. So obligate anaerobes must live in an oxygen-free environment. Oxygen will kill them. And then these guys, facultative anaerobes, they can live with or without oxygen. And these organisms, quite fortunate because they're living in an oxygen-free environment, they're going to be okay, or they can live in an oxygen-rich environment. They can use either cellular respiration or fermentation as necessary. An example of this would be E. coli. Well, we find E. coli just about anywhere now. Lives aerobically in sewage and anaerobically in human large intestine. So when food has an E. coli contamination, that means it has come out of an animal and is living aerobically on top of the vegetables. So those are the way that energy is released by prokaryotes. Roles of bacteria. Bacteria are so very important to us, and whenever you think of bacteria and fungi, you need to think of decomposers. There's bacteria everywhere in soil, in rotting plant and animal material, in waste. So bacteria decompose organic molecules into simpler molecules. As a decomposer, bacteria break down dead matter, break down waste that recycles nutrients and chemical elements in the ecosystems. Sewage treatment plants use a variety of bacteria to break down the organic matter in sewage. So bacteria, think about this. If it were not for bacteria and fungi, if it were not for decomposers, we would have dead dogs, dead possums, and now dead armadillos laying on our roads everywhere because they would not be breaking down. Whenever you see a dead possum, rotting, the first thing that happens when it's on the road, let's say there's a possum that's dead on the road, the coyotes haven't picked it up, and first day you drive by it, looks just like a smooshed possum. Second day you drive by, it has swollen and it looks like it could explode. And sometimes they do. This is because of the bacteria in the gut of the possum, the dead possum, breaking down the dead organic matter of the possum, releasing gases, and those gases cause the possum to swell. So dead things do swell up. That is how they can determine how long someone has been dead, by using, a variety of methods, but one way is through, the bacteria, through the decomposition process. So one role bacteria play, decomposers. Another role that bacteria play as a producer. These types of bacteria produce oxygen. Most of the time they're photoautotrophic. They produce oxygen, they produce food for the base of food chains, and this happens especially in aquatic environments. So this is cyanobacteria. It forms these filamentous chains in ponds and other aquatic environments. They perform photosynthesis. Then another very important role bacteria play as nitrogen fixers. Now, nitrogen is found in the atmosphere. It's the most abundant gas in our atmosphere, but we can't use that nitrogen. Well, you say, well, we have to have nitrogen. Plants have to have nitrogen to make proteins, correct? However, we cannot, and plants cannot, convert that atmospheric nitrogen into the form of nitrogen called nitrates that they need in order to grow to produce proteins. So there are nitrogen fixing bacteria everywhere in the soil, and these bacteria convert ammonia into nitrates for plants. Very important for our plants to survive, and in fact they live in a symbiotic relationship with many plants. For example, let's see if I can find the picture. Okay, this picture on the top of page 585 shows a soybean plant, which is a legume, and those types of plants have this symbiotic relationship with nitrogen-fixing bacteria. See these white knots on the roots? You would find these white knots on the roots of a clover plant. Go outside and pull up a 4-leaf or 3-leaf clover plant, and you're going to find these small white nodules on the roots. These type of plants have a symbiotic relationship with nitrogen-fixing bacteria. And a lot of times farmers will grow corn for 2 or 3 years in a field. Corn uses a lot of nitrogen out of the soil, or a lot of nitrates. And the farmer has to put a lot of synthetic fertilizer out on the soil. But then after about 2 or 3 years, the farmer will plant soybeans, and he can sell the soybeans, but the soybeans have nitrogen fixing bacteria living on their roots, and that nitrogen fixing bacteria can convert ammonia into nitrates that the plants are going to be able to use. And there are nitrogen fixing bacteria that can convert atmospheric nitrogen into nitrogen compounds that the plants are going to be able to use. So a very important role of bacteria as a nitrogen fixer, converting ammonia and also converting atmospheric nitrogen into nitrates for the plants. They're attached to the roots of clover and soybeans, can convert nitrogen gas into ammonia. They can convert ammonia into nitrates. This is a symbiotic relationship. This also happens with some other different types of plants. For example, if you were to go out into the woods and pull up certain plant, let's say that there is a type of pine tree, and I forgot what kind it is, but you just pulled it out of the ground and brought it to live in your yard, dug a hole, and it never grew very well. And the same type of tree growing extremely well out in the wild. Well, you probably did not dig enough of the dirt up around the roots, because the dirt would probably contain some symbiotic nitrogen fixing bacteria that tree really needs in order to do well, live well. So the roles that bacteria play as producers: they produce oxygen, and these would be the photoautotrophic bacteria, produce food for the base of food chain. Decomposers break down dead matter and waste. As nitrogen fixers, converting nitrogen into a form that plants can use. And also we have we have bacteria that we put to use fixing our food, making our food. There's a little section in the book, Human Use of Prokaryotes. So we use bacteria to make our cheese, yogurt, sauerkraut. We also use bacteria that can break down petroleum, break down oil from oil spills. You may see pictures of people in white suits on the beaches spraying things on the rocks. Sometimes they're spraying hot water to break up the oil, but often they're spraying a mixture that has this oil-eating bacteria. Bacteria is used to make drugs. We make insulin using bacteria and biology and bioengineering. And then we also use bacteria to break down waste in our sewer treatment plants. So I hope that was helpful.